Welcome to your ultimate pit stop, Piston Pundit, where engines roar and headlines matter. Today, we're downshifting into something heavier than horsepower. America's farming backbone is breaking under the weight of a geopolitical standoff. In early 2025, the US-China trade dispute took a sharp turn, and the fallout is hitting closer to the ground than you might expect, right in the heartland. Farmers across the country are facing evaporated contracts, falling prices, and financial ruin. Why? Because China walked away, and Washington? It went radio silent. So what does this mean for American agriculture, and how is it tied to the machinery of global trade? Buckle up. Here are the key breakdowns on the road ahead. Revved and wrecked. The tariff blow to U.S. agriculture. It all began when the Trump administration floored the gas pedal with a 145% tariff on Chinese imports. Predictably, China countered with its own heavy-duty retaliation, a 125% tariff on U.S. exports, hammering staples like soybeans, pork, and sorghum. Historically, China has been a premium-grade customer of American agriculture. In 2024, they imported a staggering $27 billion worth of U.S. crops and meats. But with the new tariffs in play, those American goods suddenly looked a whole lot more expensive and a whole lot less appealing. By mid-April, U.S. soybean sales to China dropped like a piston misfiring, down 50% in just a week. Pork exports, an even steeper nosedive, plunging 72%. The result? Warehouses full of product, and nowhere for it to go. The deeper damage, though, wasn't just economic. This tariff shock cracked the trust built over decades between U.S. farmers and their global buyers. With contracts canceled and shipments frozen, American agriculture found itself stalling in no man's land, caught between political muscle flexing and market collapse. But while American exports sputtered, China had already mapped out its detour. New routes, new rivals, China's turn toward South America. China didn't just retaliate, it rerouted. With precision, it accelerated a pre-existing strategy to diversify its agricultural imports. The big winner? Brazil. In the first quarter of 2025, China's soybean imports from Brazil surged, with a projected 31.3 million tons expected in Q2 alone. That's not just a temporary swap, it's an overhaul of the entire supply chain. And here's the twist. This wasn't a knee-jerk reaction. China's been quietly investing in Brazil's port infrastructure and forging long-term deals with Argentina and other agricultural heavyweights. The trade war simply gave Beijing a reason to push the nitrous button. For American farmers, the message couldn't be clearer. Even if tariffs are lifted tomorrow, regaining that market share is no guarantee. China's pivot is less a U-turn and more a permanent lane change. From a global trade perspective, we're witnessing a realignment in motion. Nations like China are insulating themselves from future geopolitical blowouts. The US, meanwhile, must reconsider how its agricultural sector competes, not just with products, but with reliability and long-term access. But while the international game shifts gears, the damage is far from theoretical. The real toll is unfolding on American soil, in farm towns, equipment sheds, and rural communities. And before we dive into the next chapter, if you're finding these insights valuable, hit that like button and subscribe to Piston Pundit, your ultimate pit stop for real talk on engines, exports, and everything in between. Stalled in the States, economic strain in rural America. Back on American soil, the situation is spiraling. With exports drying up and prices crashing, farmers are watching their profits vanish faster than fuel at a track day. In Iowa, America's soybean stronghold, farmers reported income losses north of $25 per acre. That might sound minor, but multiply that by hundreds of acres, and it's enough to park entire farming operations. The squeeze isn't just on the growers. Equipment suppliers, feed stores, repair shops, all the gears in the rural economic engine are slowing down. In some towns, the downturn has already triggered layoffs and closures, leaving communities on edge. And then there's the human cost. Beyond the spreadsheets and silo counts are real people confronting impossible choices. Do they risk planting a crop with no buyer? Lay off workers? Sell equipment? Or worse, sell the land? Washington floated short-term bailout packages, but most farmers see them as band-aids on a broken axle. What they're really asking for is market stability, because subsidies can't replace long-term contracts or restore trust overnight. With pressure building across farm towns, it wasn't long before the political machine kicked into gear. Trade turbulence sparks political uproar. When American farmers hit the skids, Washington hit the panic button. The Trump administration scrambled to roll out emergency financial relief, essentially economic jumper cables for the agricultural sector. But critics were quick to point out the flaw. You can't patch a blown head gasket with duct tape. Throwing money at the problem without resolving its core, volatile, reactionary trade policy was like trying to rev a seized engine. On Capitol Hill, lawmakers across party lines began pushing for legislation that would limit the executive branch's power to unilaterally slap on major tariffs. Think of it as trying to install a governor on a political throttle that had gone wide open. Meanwhile, the electoral landscape started to shift. Farm-heavy states, traditionally Republican terrain, saw rising frustration and slipping support. As farmers voiced concerns, it became clear that trade wars aren't just played out in global boardrooms. They hit ballot boxes back home. Beyond the Beltway, this crisis reignited the national debate over America's long-term trade strategy. Calls for multilateralism, market diversification, and a return to cooperative global trade echoed louder than ever. It was a wake-up call. America's food producers needed more than subsidies. They needed a plan. And with that wake-up call, a new blueprint began to take shape. Rebuilding from the ground up. As the dust settles across the cornfields and pastures, farmers and policymakers alike are drafting blueprints for a comeback. Top of the list? Expanding export horizons. Southeast Asia, Africa, and Latin America have become key targets for new trade deals, offering American producers a way to break free from the China or bust mentality. At the same time, there's growing investment in value-added agriculture. Think beyond raw soybeans. Farmers are exploring processed foods, plant-based alternatives, and sustainable packaging to unlock fresh revenue streams. Efficiency and innovation are now as critical as horsepower in a high-stakes race to global competitiveness. And let's not forget infrastructure, both physical and digital. Enhanced cold storage, logistics tech, and blockchain tracking are being deployed to make U.S. products faster, safer, and traceable, qualities that resonate in overseas markets. On the policy side, there's a mounting push for a smarter trade framework. Instead of swinging tariffs like a hammer, leaders are now talking fine-tuned torque, leveraging multilateral agreements and economic diplomacy to keep commerce smooth and stable. And now, as America's farming engine prepares to restart, the big question is, where do we go from here? Crossroads ahead: trade, torque, and transformation. The recent breakdown in U.S.-China trade ties didn't just stall exports. It blew the gasket wide open on how fragile our global positioning really is. And it showed us something else. Without a strategic, well-oiled trade engine, even the most powerful sectors can grind to a halt. But here's the silver lining. Crises create clarity. They push us to adapt, upgrade, and future-proof our systems. American agriculture is doing just that, exploring new markets, innovating farm practices, and reimagining what sustainability and profitability can look like. The road forward won't be easy, but it's navigable. With strategic steering, the agricultural sector can shift out of neutral and accelerate into a smarter, more stable future. So what's your take? Can American farmers reclaim their footing in China? Or is it time to embrace new trade frontiers? Are government bailouts enough? Or do we need deeper reform under the hood? What strategies should be prioritized to keep U.S. agriculture resilient in an unpredictable global race? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because your voice fuels this conversation. And don't forget, subscribe to Piston Pundit for more no-nonsense updates on the vehicles, industries, and policies driving our world forward. Until next time, stay driven and stay curious. Thanks for watching and see you next time. You can now check out any of the videos on the screen. There's plenty more to explore.